Welcome to This Week in Ex-Mormonism, your one-stop show for the latest and greatest from the ex-Mormon community. Each week, we'll bring you the top clips from your favorite creators like John Dellin, Exmolex, Nuance Ho, RFM, and more.
We are the new family in the ward, kind of. So we're new to the post-Mo, ex-Mo, faith crisis community. But we were inspired by the account Faith Challenge. Was that
Challenge Faith?
Challenge Faith was what it was. They did like their whole story and talked about everything, which was super helpful for us. And so we felt like if that was helpful for us, then stories like that would be helpful for other people in the same situation. So we decided that even though we're millennials that have no idea how TikTok works, that we would try to share with you our story and how we got to where we are in hopes that it will help someone else. So we are super excited to be here and connect with you all.
So I was born into a multi-generational Mormon family. I'm one of 4 siblings, which is rather small for my extended family. But I was born under the covenant. I was blessed. That's in a sacrament meeting. I was baptized when I was 8. I grew up really active in the church. We had a belief that there's no vacations when you're in the church except for when you go to Utah, because we grew up outside of Utah. When I was a youth, I went to all of the youth activities. I was a Boy Scout all the way up through Eagle Scout. I had my duty to God. I did all of the things. When I was probably halfway through high school and I hit a bit of a snag. Growing up outside of Utah, a lot of my friends at school weren't members, and maybe they had a little bit of an influence on me, but at one point I was ready to just quit it all, probably late through my junior year all the way through the end of my first year of college. I didn't want to go on a mission. I didn't want to have anything to do with the church, which was ironic because I ended up going to a church school, so that wasn't an option if I wanted to graduate. But it was my first kind of faith struggle. I was rebellious, a little bit of a delinquent and a vandal, and it was just overall an interesting time for me. Growing up in my house, their church wasn't optional. And if we wanted it to be optional, there would be consequences when we lived at my parents' house. So even when I didn't want to go to church, I was required to go to church, and there would be a lot of backlash if I didn't get ready and just got left behind. I remember one time, one of my Sunday school teachers texted me that he was going to pick me up after sacrament meeting. And then I was like, okay, whatever. And he walked right through my front door and was like, hey, why aren't you ready? And he made me get ready, and we went to church after that. So that's just an example of how I kind of grew up and what I was always around. So I never thought leaving was ever an option or anything like that. So once my parents were able to get me through high school and off to a church school, I did kind of like it. It was my first taste of freedom. I didn't really have much. I wouldn't say I had no freedom. I had my own job. I had a car that I could go places. But it was my first taste of living on my own, which I had never had before. My brothers had already left on their missions, so I was basically the only one doing my own thing in another state. I made some really good friends, and a lot of them were RMs. And the one roommate that I had that wasn't an RM, he put his papers in and got his call while we were at school. So it really influenced me to kind of maybe come back a little bit, or bring it back a little bit to the church and reconsider not wanting to serve a mission at all. Once I moved back home after my first year at college, I still kind of wavered a little bit. I had a girlfriend at the time who I was interested in, and I didn't really want to leave. But what basically I would say was the catalyst for me living on my mission was she told me that she wouldn't marry a person who didn't serve a mission. And that kind of gave me the fear that I would never be able to marry anyone if I didn't serve a mission. So that same week I went and made arrangements to get my papers submitted. And I had a mission call within the month. So it was really quick. And I felt committed. I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to serve my time, serve my 2 years. And then I know that I'll be blessed for serving those 2 years. I served a Spanish-speaking mission. And I don't think that I was, I would say, in my opinion, an exemplary missionary. I did hold a lot of leadership positions. I trained multiple new missionaries. We did do a lot of proselytizing and stuff, but we also did a lot of connecting with people. And my whole mission experience really changed my outlook. Living in a third world country, it really shook a lot of my political beliefs to the core, and seeing how these people who are treated so poorly, particularly people who immigrate and seek asylum here in the United States, it really made me sick how some people, and how even I used to think before my mission. So I'm grateful for that. So I came home from my mission with honors, and everything was fine and dandy. I spent a little time back at my parents' house before I went off to school again, which was back at the same school. Seemed like everything was the same, and I still had a really strong testimony and everything. That semester was more of an adjustment period for me, trying to figure out what I wanted to do for the rest of my life and what kind of career I wanted to make. It was also a really big time period because that's when I reconnected after high school with this lady right over here, and was actually commuting each weekend back and forth between Utah and school, just dating it up and hanging out and everything. Here's her story.
So I will summarize, because I know we're probably not that interesting, but my story is at least a little bit different. I grew up with a non-member father and a member mother, and I spent, my parents were divorced, and I spent most of my time with my mom. And so my mom did go through an inactive phase, like probably from when I was 8 until I was a little bit older, as a preteen maybe. And so because of that, I was baptized when I was 8. I don't think I was blessed in the church. I don't think that happened, because my parents were still together at that point. And so it was a little bit of a rockier start for me. The expectations in my house were a little different depending on the time frame. So we were inactive a good lot of the time, and it was a little bit rough because I was known in the ward, my family was known in the ward, but we were the project family because we didn't go very often. And so, we were the ones that the visiting teachers would come once a month and try to pull us back to church, and all of those things. And so I was kind of always the odd one out. And it was, those of you that have lived similar things know, you just kind of feel like the outcast. And I was rebellious in my teenage years, and I didn't want to go to church, and I didn't want to be a part of it. And I was just rebellious in nature and went against everything that the church stood for just because I wanted to. And so that kind of led me to the next phase of my life. So my junior year of high school, I went through what people would probably call a trial. I went through some really difficult things, and I felt like I had nowhere to turn and nowhere to go. And I was 17 and completely hopeless, essentially. And so the only thing that I really could grasp onto was the church. And so I had convinced myself that the trial and the things that were happening because I wasn't going to church and I wasn't, doing what the church said to do. And so I figured the way back in was to take this opportunity to start being active and going to church again, which I did. And so I started going back. I made an example out of myself to other young people in the ward, not make the same mistakes that I did, which eventually bit me in the butt, but I'll get to that another day. And so I did. I went back to church. I started doing everything that good church members, good girls are supposed to do. And so it kind of transitioned me back into having a solid, or what I thought was a solid testimony. And that followed me to college. I wanted to leave our home state of Colorado and move to Salt Lake to go to the U, to be around more Mormon people. Because that was my end goal, was to get my degree from the U and get married in the temple. And so that's what I wanted to do, which is what I did. And I went to the U and I practiced and I stayed in the church and then did a little bit of a timeout and adventured a little bit and then eventually came back. And then I decided to go through the temple. And going to the temple was probably what I would say is the catalyst for my faith crisis.
Hello everybody, we have our morning sin juice. It may be 29 degrees, but always gotta get it iced.
We woke up this morning to a bunch of new followers, a bunch of super nice comments, and we're just so grateful to be a part of this community now, and we're looking forward to sharing more about our story and everything with all of you. So thank you. Okay, XMO friends, coming at you with a question, so bear with me. So in college, I took a class called Family Violence, where I had to basically do this huge ass semester-long research paper on polygamy. And so I focused on basically offshoots of LDS religion that still use polygamy. I actually live close to one of the, a large group of one of the communities here. If you're familiar with the order, I live really close to them. But I'm reading all of this, and I somehow did this paper in college and managed to stay in the church. I don't know. Don't ask me why. But I'm looking back at it now, and I'm reading the contents of the CES letter and about polygamy and Joseph Smith, and I'm finding tons of things that I didn't know. And I'm just looking to, I guess, my XMO women friends especially, how do you process this? How do you deal with this? I would love to know. Polygamous cult offshoots of the LDS Church, Part 1. This first group, I had literally no idea they existed until I moved here to Utah. They go by a few different names: the Kingstons, the Kingston Clan, the Order, Latter-day Church of Christ, Davis County Co-op. There's a few different names they go by. They were founded by Ortel Kingston in the 1930s after the LDS Church that they were a part of decided to denounce polygamy, and they were excommunicated by the church because they formed their own group and just started to practice the law of consecration and polygamy in Bountiful in the Woods Cross area. And so this group believes in the Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants, Pearl of Great Price, all of the foundational Mormon LDS texts are the foundation of their current religion, just adding in polygamy. Polygamous cults, offshoots of the LDS Church, Part 2. So, the Kingstons believe in pretty much everything that the modern Mormon Church believes in, except for polygamy. So, the interesting thing about these people is there's about 8,000-ish members, they're estimating at this point. They have their holdings, because they're a business and they own a lot of companies here in Utah, their holdings are in the $300 million range. They love incest. They love underage marriage. They are super racist and only believe in basically bloodlines and keeping bloodlines clean. And they're abusive to children, childhood neglect, abuse, all over the place, underage marriages, all over the place. Overall, they're just a horrible, horrible group. Today I learned Mormon Church History Edition.
So President John Taylor, husband to 7 wives, had to live in exile from 1885 until the end of his life in 1887 because he was being prosecuted by the government for being a polygamist, which was illegal.
But that's not all. Then he had a vision in 1886 and said that he saw Joseph Smith and our Lord and Savior, who told him that we needed to keep practicing polygamy, and that the LDS Church not practicing polygamy means it has fallen into apostasy. And so isn't that just special?
So much for obeying, honoring, and sustaining the law.
So in talking about groups that are offshoots of the LDS Church who separated themselves from the LDS Church mainstream, started their own groups and practiced polygamy based off of the LDS Church teachings, based off of Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, John Taylor, all the former prophets of the LDS Church. They use their teachings and their doctrine. They use the Book of Mormon and Doctrine and Covenants, and they use the LDS text to justify polygamy and what they're doing, to justify abusing children, to justify abusing women, to justify incest, to justify all of these things. And so I think we need to remind ourselves not to undermine the importance of these other offshoot groups, because they're essentially practicing Mormon doctrine in its true original Joseph Smith form.
Okay, this one is a question for my fellow RMs. For the majority of my mission in a third world country, I was in leadership positions, and I ended up doing a lot of baptismal interviews. We also had a lot of sister missionaries, and a lot of them tended to teach and baptize more often children from ages about 9 to 13. On every single interview that I did with a child, I skipped the law of chastity question because I thought it was weird and I never questioned it. I did, however, never tell anybody that. Did other people skip that question because they thought it was weird? I just don't understand why we need to ask children about inappropriate things.
Hello, Exmo friends. We have another question for you today. So we are curious, for those of you who watched the Scientology documentary series that Leah Remini did, because we watched it when we were members still and active in the church, and we thought it was so culty and so like painfully obvious that Scientology was like this horrible organization.
I just remember thinking, how could they abuse their tax-exempt status and bully the IRS to be able to get it? And how could they abuse their members emotionally and physically and coerce them into abortions and all these terrible things? I didn't see it then, but now I find it so ironic that we were so appalled about the Church of Scientology. Got some high chews, ready to settle in.
Hi friends. So I have kind of a bit of a loaded question for my Exmo community. I've kind of seen a little bit of a pattern and being open and vulnerable, as I often am in this space. I have a parent who has narcissistic personality disorder, and I was abused as a child. And I'm curious because I kind of see a few, like more than a few of my friends in the church who had parents who either were abusive or one of them had some type of narcissistic personality disorder. And so I'm wondering if you're willing and open to share with me if that's something that you've experienced. I'm kind of wondering if there's some kind of, maybe not a relationship, or maybe some kind of connection between these two things. So I'm in school for social work, so I'm just curious. So there seems to be like this crazy false assumption that if you leave the LDS Church or the Mormon Church, if you leave, it's because you took the easy way out, or you wanted to sin, or your testimony just wasn't strong enough, or you just didn't have enough faith. So here's my question to my Exmo friends out there is, how much time, effort, and energy did you spend researching, praying, spending time in the temple, researching, how much time did you spend before you ultimately came to the conclusion that you couldn't stay in the church anymore?
There are a lot of things that I've had to give up because of it.
You guys, this has been on my mind tonight, and this just like sums it up perfectly. Like, my life would have been so much simpler if I could just continue to believe in the church, and if I could just set aside all the things that, you know, are terrible. If I could just move on with my life and just continue to believe it. But I can't, but my life would be so much fucking easier if I could. Like, I wish I could just stay and just like be okay with it and just go on about my life knowing that it's not true. Like, this is the much harder road. So I can't stand it when people say that this is the easier route, because this is like so much more difficult.
The victim to recognize a degree of responsibility for abuse.
I am a child sex abuse survivor, and I have a few thoughts on former Apostle Richard G. Scott's words on abuse. First of all, even though I am further along in my healing journey with my abuse, if I would have encountered this quote sooner, it would have been devastating. The person being abused is not to be held accountable or responsible for the abuse being done to them in any way, shape, or form under any circumstance. This is why people don't come forward, and this is why people don't share their stories. I wasn't believed by my closest family members, and this is exactly why people are afraid to announce these things or share these things with people, because this is how it gets received. In many cases, the church protects abusers, and I'm not looking for any apologetic Mormon to come on here and tell me different.
Did you ever feel a lot of pressure just to make shit up?
So I kind of feel like it was taking a handful of darts and just throwing them at the dartboard and hoping that if there was one thing in there, they would latch on and forget about the rest of the things. If I didn't know the person, then I didn't have anything that I could focus on beforehand and maybe feel was more tailored to them and their experience. But if I didn't know them, I would just compensate with saying a lot of things.
Hello, Exmo friends. So I just had a thought. When we were watching the Scientology documentary, we thought about how Scientology disconnects people from their family and the whole disconnection process, and how they, you know, they're not allowed to talk to family members that leave Scientology and things, and how fear-based that is and how cultish that is. And then I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, okay, the church kind of does that in a here and now sense, but they also do that in a afterlife sense. So Scientology says you can't be with your family here and now, and you're denied that now, whereas Mormons say you can't be here and now, like you can't be with your family in the afterlife, and so the consequence is just later rather than here and now. So interesting parallels. Prison giving us weird sex advice. Part 1. Okay, so when you're Mormon, you have your interviews before you get married to essentially be able to get married. And so you interview with 2 leaders in the church, and they ask you questions separately. It's the temple interview questions to make sure you're worthy to go to the temple and get married. So once that happened, our stake president decided to share some really strange advice.
I'll never forget the exact term he used because I thought it was so weird. He encouraged us not to be tempted to use tools in the bedroom.
Tools, guys. Tools. So, and yeah, gross. No.
Sex advice from our stake president, part 2.
Okay, so the reasoning our stake president gave for not encouraging us not to use tools in the bedroom was that he also referred to them as machines or machinery. And he said that people who use these type of things in the bedroom become too reliant on the machinery and not on their spouses. So I'm not aware of anything written in church handbooks, doctrine, anywhere about not being able to use sex toys as Mormons. I don't know where that's written. I don't even know if that's a thing, but this is what our stake president told us. So if you have ever been told something similar, we'd be interested to hear.
In short, don't be buzzing the devil's doorbell. Guess who was a Jack Mormon and repented of her sins so she could get married in the temple?
Me. So I was a Jack Mormon in college, and I screwed around and did things that the church told me not to do. And so I wanted to get married in the temple, so I went through the repentance process, which will vary depending upon the church leader that you're with. And so she might have gone through that process, or she could have lied. There's really no way of knowing. I had an ex-boyfriend that lied and said that we didn't do things, and we did, and he was married within months after the experience. So it really just kind of depends.
Dumb shit we believed when we were Mormon, Temple Edition. Part of the temple endowment ceremony is that you receive a new name by which you will be known in heaven. This is received after you're washed and anointed and receive your magic underwear.
So as is traditional to Mormons, you don't know what's going to happen when you go through the temple because it's sacred and typically members won't tell you and typically your parents won't tell you, so you have no idea what's going to happen. So I didn't know I was going to get a new name, and neither did he. And so we thought that these names were given by revelation magically, okay?
In the moment.
In the moment. That's what we thought.
It wasn't until at least a year later that I realized that everybody on any given day that enters the temple will get the same name.
It's a list.
It's a list.
There is no background checks for any of the leaders.
Okay, so here's the deal. This is a fabulous point. I am a licensed teacher. I used to work with elementary age children. I have to be background checked by my school district. I had to be every single year. Every school year, they ran a background check. So by contrast, leadership in the Mormon church is not required to have any sort of background check. They don't have to pass one. They don't make you get one. There's none of that. The leaders in bishopric in some wards might be aware if they have a registered sex offender in their ward, but they are not required to disclose that with anyone. And we let these leaders take kids on overnight trips, and it's just appalling to me. Hi, friends. So many of you asked us about what the colloquially called Magic Mormon underwear or temple garments are, so I'm going to talk about those next. So this is what they look like. So it's hard to tell, but there are symbols on these. There's little symbols that are kind of stitched in there that are kind of hard to see, but they are essentially reminders of the covenants that you make when you go through the temple, when you go through the endowment ceremony. And then the temple garment is also supposed to be a spiritual protection and some think a physical protection against temptations or physical harm. Yes, they do replace your traditional underwear. A bra can be worn on top or underneath. They're treated as sacred. You agree to not let them touch the floor when you go through the temple. And yes, you wear them under your clothes at all times during most activities.
This is actually a really interesting question because we both live in Utah currently, but we both grew up in Colorado. We even went to the same high school.
So ultimately, there are some pretty big differences. In Colorado, there's a lot less of the judgy vibe, and being Mormon, you're in the minority religiously speaking, and so there's not this superiority complex with being the majority religion in the state. And so it is a little bit different in that sense. However, a lot of it is still the same.
Even with the culture being a lot different, I was still a black sheep. There was a lot of things that I liked that weren't generally accepted by part of the church. A lot of the music I listen to is come under a lot of criticism by my family members and other members of the church.
Someone asked questions about Mormons and sex education, so let's jump in. So I have to address, a lot of Mormons live in Utah, right? And so it's important that we look at some of the laws in Utah and what that means for sex education here. This happened just this year in Utah's legislative session. They shot down a bill that would have required teaching consent in classes. In Utah, sex education is abstinence only. There is no talk of intercourse other than at a very, very basic level, and no contraceptives whatsoever, and obviously no consent. And this is a problem because in Utah, rape is the only violent crime index higher than the national average. So the responsibility falls on the parents to teach sex education. And in my personal experience here in Utah, that doesn't happen very often. Kids go to their friends, to the internet, and to porn to find the information that they're looking for. So I'm curious, if you're Mormon, what was your sex ed experience like? More embarrassing things we believed as Mormons.
So the main people of the Book of Mormon, the Nephites, were visited by Jesus after he was resurrected. Just like he did in Jerusalem, he set apart 12 apostles and called them and gave them the priesthood. Before his departure into heaven again, he blessed them all with the desires of their hearts, and 3 of them decided that they wanted to remain on earth until his next coming and preach his gospel.
This is on LDS.org, the website. We're not making it up, I promise. But they believe that those people, those 3 Nephites, are still on the earth today, and that all kind of magical experiences happen because they're still chilling here, and so you might have run into them.
Basically, you could ask anybody in the church, and they will know somebody who knew someone who had a cousin whose grandma had an experience with these 3 Nephites, guaranteed.
So a lot of you have asked about Mormons performing baptisms for the dead, and yes, that happens. Mormons also perform all the other ordinances that they...
All the blessings that you're supposed to receive from God in your lifetime that is predicated on your faithfulness to God and his commandments.
There's a lot of, like, social weirdness in the church around patriarchal blessings. Like Aunt Lydia talked about in one of her videos, it's like, the more valiant or amazing you are as a member, the longer your patriarchal blessing would be. So if you got, like, 2 full pages like we did, oh my gosh, we're so valiant, look at us now.
Most people get them when they're around 16 years or older, and it seems to be something that kind of anchors people in the faith.
So basically, it's like Mormon fortune telling from an old white guy that just happens to make it really ambiguous.
Hashtag confirmation bias.
How to enter the Mormon temple.
So here we have 2 temple recommends that we were in the process of getting completed last year and never ended up finishing them. In order to obtain a valid temple recommend, you have to complete personal interviews with your local leaders, that is the bishop and the stake president above him.
So in order to get one of these, when you interview with the bishop and the stake president, they have to ask you questions.
Some of the questions in the interview have to do with some of the following.
Do you drink coffee or tea?
Do you subscribe to any beliefs that are contrary to the teachings of the church?
Do you keep the law of chastity and not touch yourself?
Do you have faith in and sustain the living prophets and apostles and general authorities and local authorities?
And do you pay 10% of your income to the church?
Even during a global pandemic and economic crisis.
Mormon Modesty Reviews, Part 1. So let's start with this one. I had many of these in my closet. They are called maxi skirts. And they go all the way down to the floor and almost touch the floor. Some of them might touch the floor. So this is a 5 out of 5 star Mormon outfit. This one is so Mormon it hurts. The cap sleeves, and most importantly, the leggings under the dress. Even though the dress is long enough, leggings under there just to be safe. This is 5 out of 5 stars Mormon outfit. If you've ever been in a Mormon church building during a sacrament service, you've seen this outfit. No skin whatsoever. Head to toe, boots, scarf, covered. 5 out of 5 stars, ultimate Mormon outfit right here. And last but not least, the trend Mormon women have been rocking for decades, wearing a t-shirt under an inappropriate dress that would be inappropriate without the t-shirt. 5 out of 5 stars.
Okay, so we have received this comment more than one time, so we just want to address it. Both of us went to temple prep classes before we attended the temple for the first time.
Both of us were taught by different temple prep teachers and went at different times.
Doing a simple search on the Gospel Library app from the church will not yield a result for the exact term new name, including in results from preparing to enter the Holy Temple, the student or instructor manual. If you were taught about the new name by your temple prep teacher, that was a prerogative of their own, and it was
not sanctioned by the church.
Sanctioned by the church.
Also, you will be called this name technically in heaven, because the apostles have stated that men call their wives by these names to resurrect them on Resurrection Day.
Temple prep class does not teach anything specific about any of the goings on in the temple aside from baptisms of the dead.
What Mormons believe about the afterlife, Part 1.
So basically, Mormons believe that after you are judged, you will be sent to one of 3 degrees of glory. There's also outer darkness, which we will talk about in a separate video its own. The first degree of glory is the celestial kingdom. This is where the murderers, idolaters, adulterers, etc. will go after they are judged for their works. The second is the terrestrial kingdom. This is where good people that never received the light or gospel of Christ will go. The highest degree of glory is the celestial kingdom. This is where the people who are members of the Mormon Church will go. In order to get there, you have to be baptized, you have to receive your endowment and be married in the temple, and each of these ordinances, as they're known, corresponds to a level within the celestial kingdom.
Because we fell away and left the Mormon Church, most people believe we're going to outer darkness or the celestial kingdom. Let us know which one you think you're going to. By far, our most requested topic has been Mormon hell or outer darkness, so let's jump in.
So Mormons believe in 2 different types of hell. The purgatory-like spirit prison that happens before you are resurrected, and the eternal damnation known as outer darkness. Spirit prison is reserved for those people who die in their sins during this life. The people that inherit eternal damnation or outer darkness are Lucifer, the devil, the spirits that were cast out with him in the beginning, and the people who commit the unpardonable sin, and these people are known as the sons of perdition.
So Mormons believe that only a small amount of people will actually be sent to outer darkness. There's also controversy amongst the church, amongst prophets, on whether or not women can be sons of perdition. Brigham Young and Joseph F. Smith said they couldn't, but Wilford Woodruff said that there might be women.
So chances are you aren't sent to super VIP.
In fact, 8 hours ago, this story broke. And it turns out the LDS Church is doing a survey, an internal survey for members between ages 18 and 35. So, what do they want to know? Fortunately, someone took screenshots so we know part of the things that they're asking. For example, this one, a few of these talk about gender roles, a family proclamation to the world, specifically the role of women in the church and how women are treated differently than men. And then members have to rank how much this bothers them, from a great deal to I don't have this concern. It also talks about women's roles in the temple, and it also talks about the doctrine of polygamy, which I like to say bothers me a great deal.
This definitely isn't the first time that the church has conducted surveys on topics that are generally considered sensitive. The church states that all of this is doctrine, yet they're interested in how much it bothers people.
Let's play Mormon Pictionary.
Okay, I'm ready. Let's go.
All right, here's the first one.
A horse.
Try this one.
A win for Satan?
Okay, how about this?
Anti-Mormon lies for sure.
Oh boy, okay, this is the last one, and then I'm giving up.
Ooh, Angel Moroni. CES letter is a common catalyst for the faith unraveling of people who formerly were members of the Mormon Church.
The CES letter was written by an amazing human named Jeremy Runnels. You can find it at cesletter.org and read the whole thing for free. But the gist of it is Jeremy, as a member of the church at the time, had questions about church doctrine, church history, and sought guidance from church leaders to try to help him answer his questions.
Many of these questions had to do with unsavory details of the founding of the church and a lot of inaccuracies in the Mormon doctrine. The letter never received a response.
The church accused Jeremy of apostasy and held a disciplinary council, for which Jeremy resigned from the church officially. We're going to help break down the CES letter into smaller chunks for those of us that have been asking, so we can share some of it with you. So you want to go on a Mormon mission. There's some things that you should know.
Let's take a look at the handbook real quick. Use only dignified language and never use slang.
You need to wake up at 6:30 a.m. every day, and it's lights out by 10:30 every night.
You're going to be working every day, including Sundays And holidays.
No swimming whatsoever.
No television, no movies, no radio, and no internet except for missionary authorized purposes.
No listening to music that merely entertains or has romantic lyrics or overtones.
And when you do listen to that music, you cannot use headphones because it separates you from your companion and they might not be able to hear what you're listening to.
Also, no porn and no touching yourself.
You should also never be alone with the opposite sex or allow your companion to be alone with the opposite sex.
Let's talk highlights of the CES letter specifically concerning the Book of Mormon.
The Book of Mormon claims that the principal people in its narrative are direct descendants of Jews. DNA evidence concludes that Native Americans could not have descended from Jews like the church claims.
So the CES letter poses a really good question. On the left, you'll see modern geographical places near Joseph Smith. And then on the right, you'll see names in the Book of Mormon. Is it really coincidence that they're all this similar?
There are other anachronistic words in the Book of Mormon that could not have been possible at the time, such as using the word horse to describe tapirs, or steel that existed in time before blast furnaces. There's also the View of the Hebrews by Ethan Smith that was published in the 1820s that looks extremely similar to the Book of Mormon's ideas.
Hello, friends. We had an interesting experience last night.
We got banned!
So last night, our live was cut short for violating community guidelines. Somebody reported our live in the midst of having a bunch of active TBMs in the chat. To be clear, we did not violate any community guidelines and it is being appealed as we speak. Here's the thing, we welcome open dialogue and different viewpoints. However, we are also ex-Mormons. We are also ex-Mo content creators. So if you come across our stuff and you don't like it and it's offensive to you, I don't know what to tell you. Don't watch it. Don't look at it. Don't report it and ruin it for everyone else. We don't infiltrate Mormon spaces. We do not go after Mormons. I tag all our videos with Exmo. So if we don't infiltrate yours, don't come infiltrate ours. Do you enjoy getting up at 5:30 in the morning and learning about the Lord? Then you might like seminary.
Growing up as a Mormon in Colorado, I had the privilege of attending early morning seminary every morning before I went to high school. Seminary was a class that was held at 6 o'clock in the morning every single day, and we would talk about gospel topics. A rotating schedule of the year's topics going from the Book of Mormon to the Doctrine and Covenants to the Old Testament to the New Testament, and then on and on. So on top of our 3-hour church meetings every Sunday, I would attend 50 minutes every single day the rest of the week, except for Saturday. One of the big components of seminary was learning the scripture mastery scriptures, where we would have to memorize passages so we could bring them up at a moment's notice.
Getting up to learn about Jesus is what every sleep-deprived teen wants to do.
Somebody made a video claiming that we aren't sent to a degree of glory, but that we are learning to live with God and be comfortable with that. But he didn't allow stitching, so here's my response. I'll just tag you. Right here in the Doctrine and Covenants, it says, receive of his glory and receive the presence of the Son. Also here in the Doctrine and Covenants, talking about receiving the telestial kingdom, they say are thrust down. That kind of sounds like sent. It's no wonder there's a common misconception about being sent to a kingdom of glory, because right here in Preach My Gospel it says, assigned a kingdom of glory. Not to mention your cited source is a talk from Brad Wilcox when he was Department of Teacher Education and not a general authority. What he has to say sounds a lot closer to the philosophies of man mingled with scripture. Not that it matters anyway, because it's all based on the words of a charlatan. Do you really have to pay 10% of your income to get into heaven?
Yes. Yes, you do.
So one of the commandments that the church teaches is that you must pay 10% of your income increase to the church. In the old days, you used to pay it manually in little envelopes like these ones that you see here.
So in order to get into the temple, you have to have a temple recommend. And in order to get that, you have to answer yes to this question. Are you a full tithe payer?
But it wasn't always this way. over 100 years ago, they taught that eventually we won't need to pay tithing anymore.
Apparently even having $100 billion still isn't enough. In 2012, they added this legal disclosure to all the tithing slips online or physical documents telling you that they get to choose where the money goes and you don't have a say in it.
Don't forget that a lot of the blessings that you might receive are predicated on whether you pay tithing or not.
Mormon artwork reviews, part 1. So this one is a pretty common one that you'll see in a ton of Mormon meeting houses. But the first thing I noticed about this one is Jesus is white, which is not accurate. And it looks like everybody else is white too. And it also looks like we're all going to be playing the trumpet. So I say like 5 out of 10.
This is the one that stares menacingly at you from behind the bishop's desk as he asks you about your worthiness. 3 out of 10.
Oh, look at him reading the gold plates. Little Joseph Smith, bless his little heart. Except I think there might be something missing, like a rock or a hat. 0 out of 10.
Oh yeah, that's more like it. 10 out of 10. This guy looks nothing like a salamander. 0 out of 10.
So friends, we had to get on here and just do a quick little thank you because we woke up this morning to 45,000 of you being here.
This was not an intention, and for that reason we haven't ever really done an update on our followers because we haven't really felt worthy of any number of you following us before.
No, we just got on here to share our story and join the Exmo community and just feel a part of something significant to us.
It was really just about adding to the conversation with our experiences because there's a lot of experiences out there. It's nice to have a sense of community.
But we seriously love you guys so much. Our regulars who come on our live, we love you guys so much. Everybody who asks us questions, supports us, comments on our videos. We are so grateful. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Mormon fun fact of the day, y'all. So the church, the LDS Church, owns a company called Ensign Peak Advisors. And this is an investment management firm that helps them invest their extra tithing dollars. This headline sums it up nicely. They kept the lid on the $100 billion fund for fear that tithing receipts would fall. Oh no. And just to put this in perspective for you, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints investment fund is larger than the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Because Ensign Peak is considered an arm of the church, the super fun part is they largely don't pay U.S. taxes.
What reason does a church need to be invested in companies like Apple and Tesla and Microsoft and make over $20 million on the GameStop stock surge?
To make matters worse, they don't have to disclose what they're spending their money on, so we don't really know if they're spending that money on charitable causes or not. Let's talk the whistleblower complaint that I think anybody would be patting me on the back if I donated $30 to charity and I had $100 million in a bank.
I believe Jesus' words were, "Sell all thou hast and give unto the poor." Because the culture in the Mormon church is that every young man should serve a mission, a lot of parents offer like crazy incentives in order to get their kids to want to go on a mission. For instance, I've heard of people like buying their kid a car if they served an honorable full-time mission just so that they could get them to make the choice for themselves. So I wanted to hear what other people, if you have an experience with some crazy incentive just so that your parents could say that you served a full-time mission. So stitch this, comment, do whatever. Let's talk about Joseph Smith's first vision. The account of Joseph Smith's first vision was one that I memorized while I was on my mission so that I could give a dramatic reading of it while teaching investigators. As you can read here in a talk by Gordon Hinckley, it's pretty important to the church because it proves that it's either true or false.
As it turns out, heavenly visions weren't that uncommon in Joseph Smith's time. It's also suspicious that a man named Norris Stern gave this account of a heavenly vision that he had in 1815, which was 5 years before Joseph Smith had his heavenly vision experience. So there are some interesting parallels between the two. Both talk about having a near-death experience, both are interrupted by light, both see the Father and Son in bodily form, which is very specific, both are unable to describe the appearance, and both use the word pillar in their description. Hello, friends!
We did something today.
We did a thing, and it's kind of crazy. but we did it, and we're still alive. So we're waiting for the Bill Gates microchip to activate and whatever special powers that has. So the last few days, there's been a lot of things happening in the Exmo community surrounding abuse, basically. And we haven't set anything up to this point, and that's because of me. Because I am a survivor of sexual abuse, and so the events that have gone on in this community the last few days and hearing about them has been extremely triggersome for me, but I didn't want to pass up the opportunity to at least share a few things. Number one, believe women, period. I don't need to expand on that. Believe women when they come forward, period. And two, continue to hold space for those in this community who are triggered by what's happening and need to take a step back. That doesn't mean they're being silent and siding with the oppressor.
As cis males, we need to take accountability for our actions rather than deflect and get defensive. Oh, hello. Didn't see you there. So yesterday there was an update to the church handbook with some rather interesting new parts.
So one of the first interesting updates is on vaccines. So lots of members in the Mormon Church are absolutely adamant against getting the COVID vaccine, and so they added this little section that encourages members to get vaccinated, and interestingly enough, their prophet also got vaccinated.
They also added a section about affinity fraud, which I would assume is in response to the growing MLM community here in Utah, but I think it can ironically be applied to some other organizations.
Probably thanks to the Lori and Chad Daybell controversy, they've also added a section on extreme preparation or survivalism, saying that your efforts to prepare should be motivated by faith, not by fear.
They also thought letting young single adult men be counselors in the bishopric was a good idea.
Joseph Smith's First Vision Part 2.
So aside from the eerie similarities between other accounts of heavenly visions and Joseph Smith's first visions, there are the differing accounts that were written at different times.
So Joseph Smith says the first vision occurred in 1820. The interesting thing is, being that it is a massive event that I would think he would want to share with other people given his nature, he didn't publish it until 1842. There were major church publications being written and shared at the time, and interestingly enough, the first vision wasn't shared in any of them.
There were a few different written accounts of this vision, but over the iterations of the account, many things changed, including who exactly appeared to him, which is the most damning thing to me. Joseph Smith himself wrote 4 of the accounts that the church recognizes, and nobody seems to have a problem with the discrepancies. When I was growing up Mormon, I turned 12 years old. I received this little pamphlet that they give to all of the youth called For the Strength of Youth. The pamphlet outlines a lot of the standards that you're supposed to follow as a youth to help you be spiritual and grow in the church. On things like your dress, the music and dance that you do, and a lot of other things like sexual purity. At the time, there was a lot of things that I liked media-wise that was contrary to the standards for the strength of youth. At the time, I felt guilty for liking these things, and even to this day, I get a lot of backlash on the kind of music that I listen to because it's, quote, dulling to the spirit. It was really sad because something that was so special to me and made me feel good was deemed as hurtful in other people's eyes.
Hit it, hit it, hit it, hit it, get it, get it, get it, get it. Ow, 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 show them girl, yeah, boom, boom, bow, bow, boom, 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 bow, 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 boom, boom, bow, bow, bow.
Hi guys, it's General Conference Weekend, so we figured we'd find some tweets and give them some ratings.
Okay, this one's pretty good. It's basically like the Mormon equivalent of saying, "Are you triggered, liberal?" Also, bonus points for the hashtag Desnat. I give it a solid 7.
I would like to give this one like a -2 out of 10 because this is like just so stupid. Like, I don't even know where to begin with this one.
I wonder what this guy thinks about teachings of blood atonement, or the priesthood ban for black people, or marrying 14-year-olds as your plural wives. 11 out of 10.
These are just a few of our favorites. Stay tuned for more.
Pause to read. Yikers.
So the thing that stood out the most to me about this is the stop rehearsing your doubts with other doubters. Isn't that convenient? Stop putting yourself in communities where people might encounter that you're having a faith crisis, or that you might share that you're struggling, or people might validate how you're feeling.
Choose to believe and stay faithful, he says, but only go to faith-promoting sources to answer all of those questions, because we control the information that way.
People say to people that have left that you just go to these anti-communities seeking out this information because you know it'll validate what you're feeling. And that's just not true. We were looking for truth, and we found a community of people who also found the truth and found out that it wasn't what the church told us it was.
This is just going to be the ammo that people use to send to their unbelieving kids for the next 20 years.
My back's aching, my bras too tight, my hips are shaking from left to right. My back's aching, my bras too tight, my booty shaking from the left to the right. My back.
Do you touch yourself too often? Do you think you have an addiction? Don't worry, the Mormon Church has some advice for you. These tips are from an official church pamphlet that was distributed in 1973. Number 1 is to not touch the intimate parts of your body ever, except during normal toilet processes.
If your friends also have a problem with touching themselves, definitely break off your relationships with them, because they're a bad influence.
This is key. When you bathe, do not admire yourself in the mirror, and only take 5 to 6 minutes to bathe.
When you go to bed, make sure you wear really tight clothing so you don't accidentally touch yourself at night.
And last but not least, if the temptation is overpowering, get out of bed and go in the kitchen and make yourself a snack, even if you're not hungry and despite your fears of gaining weight.
Or the boogeyman. If you're struggling with sexual purity, give these tips a go and let us know what you think. Behold, the Bible of Mormon Youth Indoctrination.
Let's take an in-depth look at this pamphlet that they give to 12-year-olds and up in the church and why it is so toxic. So let's start with the big one, sexual purity. You may have heard us mention it before, but it's actually written right here. Remember, this is written for 12-year-olds. The Prophet Alma taught that sexual sins are more serious than any other sin except murder or denying the Holy Ghost. Murder.
They also talk about how youth shouldn't frequently date the same person, that could lead to immorality. Also, you can't date until you're 16, and even when you're 16, you shouldn't be going on dates with less than one other couple, because that could lead to immorality. Did they mention immorality?
You've heard us talk about tithing before. Yep, kids have to pay it too. There's even Mormon kids that pay it on their allowance. And your attitude is important in paying tithing. Pay it because you love the Lord. And guess what? Doesn't matter how old you are, you're still gonna give your money to the church. So we should be live right now, but we're not, because we started our live and 5 minutes in, somebody reported us. We got banned. Now we're suspended, which is awesome. But I have news for whoever keeps doing this. We're not going anywhere. We're not going to stop. We have content on other platforms. We're just gonna go film a YouTube video and update people on our Instagram. So you can report us all you want, but we're not going anywhere.
It'll get appealed.
It'll get appealed too. Like, we didn't violate community guidelines, but thanks for wasting everyone's time. So yesterday we talked about the For the Strength of Youth pamphlet, that is the guidelines and standards for those 12 and up in the church for how they should live their lives. Today I'm going to take you back to the 1965 version of this pamphlet, specifically telling women how to dress and groom themselves. Let's jump in. All right, girls, listen up. Here we go. Girls should dress to enhance their natural beauty and femininity. Clothes should be comfortable and attractive. That's right, attractive. And if you didn't already know, few girls or women look well in backless or strapless dresses. Apparently they make you look ungainly and show the bony structures of the body. Pants are not desirable attire for women shopping, in school, or at the library, in cafeterias or restaurants. Girls should always try to look feminine in their dress, and they should not dress like boys or give a masculine appearance. And women's hair is more becoming when it's natural. Oh, and no tight pants. Leggings? No way. Stupid shit Mormons say. Part 1.
Did you hear what the prophet said? The end is so close.
The temple ceremonies are sacred, not secret testimony.
Once they realize what they're doing is wrong, they'll be back.
I was in line this morning getting my daily 32-ounce soda, and I saw her car pull into the Starbucks parking lot. So she must not be following the word of wisdom. Hi, I'm Lazy Learner.
I'm Lax Disciple.
We're so glad to have you here with us today.
Here's some resources that you can look at to become more like us. I think one of the most helpful things for me was the Gospel Topics essays.
Don't worry, you can elevate your Lazy Learner status by listening to Hours Upon Hours of Mormon Stories podcast.
This one's for Lax Disciples only.
I'll be continuing my journey of lazy learning this week with this puppy.
Let's talk about the calling and election made sure, otherwise known as the second anointing. The second anointing was a really difficult thing, especially for Jordan, and was kind of a shelf-breaking item for her, just because it is really weird. Today we listened to an episode of Mormon Stories with Tom Phillips, who received his second anointing, and within a year or two after that, he left the church. There's not a lot of reading to be done on church sources, but essentially what's being done is, instead of being able to become a priestess or a priest unto the Most High God, you are anointed a priestess or priest and king unto the Most High God. This little phrase right here, confer godhood, I thought to be the most interesting. In the podcast, Tom Phillips mentioned that he was basically convinced that when this was going to happen, he would meet Jesus Christ. Ordinary people in the church aren't going to ever have this experience, and you're not supposed to talk about it. Also, pause on this one because Brigham Young sucks.
So someone on a live asked me to look at Joseph Smith's birth chart. So let's dive in. So first of all, Joseph Smith has a Capricorn sun. He's got an Aquarius moon, and his rising sign is in Cancer. So here's some interesting things about his birth chart. So Joseph's moon is also in his 8th house. And this is interesting because people with moons in the 8th house tend to not be able to find peace romantically or stability, and they're often looking or interested in other partners, more of a wandering eye. Venus is also in his 8th house, and that indicates that typically his love life is hidden in some sort of way. The Sun sextiles Pluto, which gives him almost this magnetic attraction. People are drawn to him. He's almost hypnotic, and this leads to a strong temptation to be able to manipulate people. His moon also conjuncts Venus, which makes him a hella charmer, especially to women. His Neptune is also in Scorpio, which kind of draws him to magic and occult type things, which makes sense with his treasure digging.
Dumb shit we believed as Mormons. Part whatever.
3, I think?
In section 77 of the Doctrine and Covenants, Joseph Smith proclaims that the earth is going to be 7,000 years old by the time that the end of the world happens.
Just to clarify, this is coming from Mormon scripture.
You may be asking yourself, what? This can't be true. What about the dinosaurs? They certainly lived more than 7,000 years ago.
There are a couple of apologetic theories on how this works, but one of my favorites is that Satan came to Earth and hid dinosaur bones on the Earth to deceive people.
There are other theories saying that the dinosaur bones existed from the matter from which the Earth was created because it already existed beforehand. I think the most simple explanation would be that the Earth is not 6,000 years old. Last night while on a live, I went to grab my trusty triple combination to talk about something that the Mormon Church had changed in the Book of Mormon. While this is definitely not something that I discovered, many people know about this, I didn't realize that this change existed in the copy that I got because it was purchased for me for Christmas as a gift back in, I think, 2009. In my copy of the Book of Mormon, it says that the Lamanites are the principal ancestors of the American Indians. In the current edition, they say the Lamanites are among the ancestors of the American Indian. Now, we all know that the church does not cave to societal pressure, but I suppose when there is mounting evidence against the claim that the Book of Mormon makes about the Native Americans in America, I guess they don't want to look so bad when it comes to
Mormon Vault. Let's take a look. The Mormon Vault is literally in the side of a mountain, and it's strong enough to withstand a nuclear blast. So the church says that they built this vault to contain, preserve, and protect microfilms that have to do with family history. There's also a few other things that they mentioned, like scriptures in every language published, leather-bound temple ordinance books from the 1960s, and a few other things. It is heavily guarded by security, so you can't just like drive up and take a look at it, and it's not open to the public. But this is one of the pictures that we have of what the inside looks like.
There's a lot of speculation as to why it's so heavily guarded, and a lot of people say that it's because they have the gold plates. But that couldn't be possible because, one, the official narrative is that those gold plates were taken back into heaven by Moroni, and two, the 11 people who said they saw it actually did never really see it. They later on in life revealed that they saw it with their spiritual eyes. So
this is a great question, so let's talk about this. So Mormons do believe that people who die are able to give consent in the afterlife, whether they want to have their work done or join the church in the afterlife or not.
So Mormons believe that after you die, you go to a kind of holding place called spirit prison or paradise. And those who went to spirit prison are those who are being baptized for, so that they can get a chance to accept the gospel.
So in order for a member to perform these ordinances in the temple, for a person that's died within the last 110 years, they have to be the closest living relative or have permission from a closest living relative. However, proving you have permission isn't exactly the most sophisticated process, so it happens all the time, even if people don't have permission. For example, they had to reiterate that you can't do work for celebrities or victims of the Holocaust. You can complain to the church that people are doing work for your family members, but there's really nothing you can do about it. However, if you'd like me to check to see if this was done for one of your family members, send me an email and I'll help you out.
Jordan is modeling our wonderful unisex fig leaf apron. It has a metal clasp as opposed to the traditional tying method and is worn only in the Mormon temple. So the reasoning behind this is because after Adam and Eve partake of the fruit in the endowment ceremony, the devil or Satan or Lucifer tells them that they should cover their nakedness after they realize that they are naked so that God won't see it. Some people are saying in the comments on our video that there's no green in the temple, and I don't know what to tell you. I'm not lying, I literally was married. Both of us were married wearing that apron, so.
Let's look at some embarrassing things I pinned on Pinterest when we were Mormon. This one's fun, because kids don't have enough to do with school and homework and all of those things. We want to make them memorize more meaningful things, like facts about the prophets.
When you run out of the primary answer of things that you're supposed to do on the Sabbath, go to the Sunday can.
This is a super fun one. I don't know what the hell I was thinking with this. Printing out pictures of the apostles and taping them to Easter eggs? For what? Why? I don't even know what to say about this one. And he's not wearing garments, so.
I don't know if these are supposed to be like those candles that have the saints on them or like bowling pins, but yeah.
If you've got a favorite Mormon indoctrinating kid activity, drop it in the comments. I want to hear about it. It's not a toga, it's McKay, and he's wearing the beautiful temple robes. They're made of a gorgeous unironed polyester and have these gorgeous little shoulder pleats and an easy clasp for doing and undoing in the temple.
So the robe is supposed to represent righteousness, purity, and authority in the priesthood. So when you first put on the robes, you wear it on the left shoulder, representing the lesser or Aaronic priesthood, and then they teach you the signs and tokens for that priesthood. Then at one point you have to move it and every other piece of clothing to the other side, representing the Melchizedek priesthood or higher priesthood, and they teach you the signs and tokens for that. It would be a lot better if they called it a toga though.
So it finally happened. We couldn't resign from the Mormon church as soon as we wanted to because McKay was still at a church school and we were waiting for his grades to be posted.
Near the end of the semester, we had some information leading us to believe that they knew about our TikTok account and they were trying to get me expelled.
So we knew we were facing likely excommunication or an ultimatum to resign. So we decided to take our power back from this awful corporation, and we decided that we were going to present them with an ultimatum. They could either let us resign without facing disciplinary council and excommunication, or we would share the entire process of excommunication and all the details with our platform. So upon realizing the predicament they're in, we got an email saying that they would send our information to church headquarters to resign our records from the Mormon church.
Get your money, man. Life goes on.
I'm hopeful. Yes, I am hopeful for today. Take this music.
Some people have been saying today in our comments that the endowment ceremony, you can leave at any time if you don't want to continue. Well, let's take a quick look at that. Take a second to read this whole paragraph, but this last sentence right here is what I want to focus on. You may now make it known by raising your hand. This is implying that this is the one and only opportunity that you will have to withdraw, and any time after this is unacceptable. Not to mention that when you receive the endowment for yourself, you are going with a escort who is probably someone you're related to or a member of the ward that you know. If you choose to withdraw, you also have to handle the pressure of walking past all the rows of temple patrons on your way out. They put you in the front row for a reason. There's absolutely no informed consent in the temple. You do not know what you're agreeing to beforehand, and if you do contrary after, then you're going to be damned.
So therapy hit me right in the feels today, and due to that, I don't have anything not emotionally loaded or really constructive to say. The last few days, I have been sitting with what led up to the excommunication of Natasha Helfer. The gaslighting, the manipulation, and the spiritual violence used against Natasha Helfer during this whole process is a perfect example of how the church views and treats women. So there's room for differing opinions in the church, but don't talk about them. The church doesn't care about its people and improving the lives of others because Natasha was speaking as loud as she could to say, your policy is damaging, your policy leads to suicide, your policy is harmful, and they still won't listen.
Every good tree bring forth good fruit, and every corrupt tree bring forth evil fruit. Normally war.
All right, everyone, you asked, we delivered. This is the men's hat that they wear in the temple, also known as the bonnet or the chef's hat. Do notice that it has an entirely flat top. It also has what they call a bow on this side. Why that's a bow, I'm not really sure. And then it also has this little tail thing that they've recently removed because no one knows why it was there.
So the idea of the hat is not exclusive to Mormonism, but in the Old Testament is kind of where it's based. Apparently the top is flat because in Exodus, the hat described by the Lord is supposed to have a crown to go on top of it. So it's suggesting that you will be crowned with glory eventually. It also suggests lifting one's capabilities to do Jesus' work through his power, and also that a man's thoughts are what he is. Okay, we get this question a lot, and we want to explain it that way people have an idea. There's two primary ways that we would suggest trying to do it. The first goes through your local bishop, and we can show you how to find your local bishop if you haven't been to church in a really long time. The other one goes through quitmormon.org, which is a really direct way to do it, but the wait times are extremely long, so if it's something you want to get done quick.
Okay, so if you need to find your bishop, the first thing you're going to do is go to churchofjesuschrist.org/maps. So in the top box, all you need to do is enter your address and hit the search bar, and it will give you the ward for your location. So you're going to pick the ward. Right here it would be Ammon 25th, for example. We don't live here, this is an example. Once you click on that, at the bottom here, you'll see you have the bishop's phone number to reach out to. There are sample resignation letters on the web that you can find if you search them, but all you need to do is say that you want to resign your records and give them your information. Or go to quitmormon.org.
Oh, buckle up, this is a good one. Here's a little tidbit from a manual that was scanned into BYU's database from the Young Woman's Journal. You can read right here that as far back as 1837, the prophet Joseph Smith taught that the inhabitants of the moon were approximately 6 feet in height, dressed like the Quakers, and lived to be about 1,000 years old.
But hold up, it gets better. Joseph Smith's father gave a patriarchal blessing where he told someone that they would preach the gospel, but not just anywhere, not somewhere cool, on the moon. Let me just reiterate that for you. They said that they would preach the gospel to the inhabitants of the moon. Take that in.
If you want to read the whole thing, it's right there.
Let's look at some either former Mormons or currently active Mormons that you might know. You can't talk about famous Mormons without talking about Donnie and Marie. These two actually led to a surge of investigators in the church when they started getting famous.
You couldn't pick him out in a crowd, but you've definitely seen his book. Stephen R. Covey was a Mormon.
Oh, Ted, what a fun one. He was actually baptized while he was killing people, so that's fun.
This one's for all those lifelong emos. Dallin Weeks, former bassist for Panic at the Disco and current frontman of I Don't Know How, But They Found Me.
This one was new to me. Butch Cassidy. He actually came here with his parents as pioneers to Utah.
Dina Jane, one of the members of Fifth Harmony, was also a Mormon.
And last but definitely not least, Brendan Urie, lead singer of Panic at the Disco, it was also raised Mormon.
church was against birth control.
So in the last few years, Mormons have kind of reformed their ideas about birth control and it's more accepted now. However, their major insurance company still won't cover it.
This is under the exclusions section of a DMBA policy that we had last year. Mainly this part right here saying that it is excluded, which means you wouldn't normally get it.
They say they'll cover it for some exceptions, but as someone who has tried to pursue those exceptions, let me tell you, they don't happen. The church will cover things like IVF, but the donor has to be the person's spouse. They will not cover if you're using a surrogate or somebody else's lovely things. Also, fun fact, up until recently, this has been changed, but this was the stance beforehand. The artificial inseminations of single sisters is not approved, and they might have to have a disciplinary council over it. The church also discourages all forms of surgical sterilization, and they also strongly discourage selling sperm or eggs.
And they wonder why people call it a cult. Some people don't like what we say on here, and instead of just scrolling along, they gotta leave a comment.
So let's take a look at some of our favorites. This is one of my all-time favorites. I don't think I've ever been called a waste of life force before, so this one was special.
I would like to thank this person for their genuine concern, and their comment really swayed me into thinking differently about the church.
Apparently what we're doing here on TikTok requires an exorcism. Not sure about that. Or counseling, which is good because I'm in school to be a therapist, so that works out.
Damn, whatever happened to stay in the boat? Stay in the boat. Oh, you gotta stay in the boat. It definitely is a better place if you don't like luscious locks like mine. Why are Mormons always so rich? And I don't think it's really a common thing, but it is kind of strange. I remember I had this Sunday school teacher who said that being rich meant that you had the biggest TV. And if you had the biggest TV, then all the kids would want to come over to your house to play instead of your kids going to someone else's house to play. Which then meant that you controlled the media they consumed and you were able to basically influence their kids rather than having your kids influenced by their parents and their teachings, which could somehow be wrong. So some people have this kind of odd logic behind it. I don't get it.
Today we are talking about some of the differences in expectations and roles and physical appearance of men and women in the Mormon Church. So here is McKay and I's lovely little horrible drawings of the differences that we've come up with. The full video will be on YouTube tonight, but here are some of our favorites. One of my favorites from Ezra Taft Benson, a little gem. Women are divinely ordained to homemaking, motherhood, and companionship.
My Boyd K. Packer, talking about men should be the breadwinner of the household and the head, even though I've never been the breadwinner.
Another special one from M. Russell Ballard. Don't wander around looking like men. Put on a little lipstick now and then and look a little charming. It's that simple. So if you aren't married, come on, it's that simple. One of my favorites. We don't even need to expand on this one. Submit to your husbands. That's all I need to say. That's doctrine. Don't miss out on the whole video. Coming tonight. We've got the link in bio. Stupid shit Mormons say.
Parte dos. We love the sinner, but we abhor the sin.
Nothing looks as good as modesty feels.
Remember who you are and what you stand for.
We don't worship Joseph Smith.
All those problematic prophets, they were just products of their time.
You don't touch the private or sacred parts of another person's body unless you're married.
Also, don't arouse those emotions in your own body.
The prophet would be struck down before he led the church astray.
A bad thing that you are participating in. Oh, I'm a good person. Okay, well, there's still a bad thing that you're participating in. That's not possible because I'm a good person. Okay, so maybe you aren't, like, totally aware of the bad thing, but it's still happening. No. The group of people that the bad thing is happening to are all unanimously saying that I'm a good person. Okay. Okay, you're starting to make me a little uncomfortable, and my comfort is extremely important. Oh. Okay, now I'm getting upset because I really try to be a good person and I buy organic and I use a water pick. Okay, you know what? Now I'm getting angry. How dare you try to tell me, what are we talking about?
Separating ourselves into tribes plays perfectly into Satan's hands because disunity leaves everyone more vulnerable to deception, including from former members eager to justify their exit from the church. Social media inflames all of these divisions by dishing up snippets of facts that rarely represent the whole truth and providing a forum for one of Satan's most insidious tactics, flattery.
Oh, I got a lot of feelings about this. Number one, the Mormon Church is scared. They're terrified at what's happening on social media, at what's happening inside the ex-Mormon communities. They are absolutely running scared. And flattery, half-truths, I think that's something the Mormon Church is an expert in, not ex-Mormons. My whole life in the church, they did nothing but provide snippets of truth.
Nice. So obviously a big thank you to all you beautiful people that follow us. It's been great. Just thinking that people want to hear the bullshit that we have to say on a daily basis. So thank you very much for following us. On a business note, we had 2 podcasts that went live today. One of the ones that we did was the Wild and Woke podcast. You can find that one linked in our link tree. The other one that we did was our second episode of the Dad Challenge podcast. You can also find that in our link tree, so go check it out. It was a fun and kind of weird one.
Hey guys, we're out here at Teardrops Building, downtown Salt Lake City, gathering for Natasha Helfer. We've got all the people behind us. So yeah, here we are. Hey guys, in light of Mother's Day, let's chat about the Mormon doctrine surrounding Heavenly Mother. Heavenly Mother, right here, is straight off the LDS Church's website. There's a Gospel Topics essay actually written about it, and they believe that as is a Heavenly Father, there is also a Heavenly Mother. However, there's essentially slim to none written about her, and if you pray to Heavenly Mother in the church, for example, you could be subject to discipline. But don't worry, the Mormon church leaders say that not praying to her in no way belittles or denigrates her. So it's kind of crazy that when Fiona Gibbons, who is a member of the Mormon church, talks about Heavenly Mother, she gets fired or personally decided to leave the BYU Research Institute. Fiona is very well respected in the Mormon community, and she shared all the research that she's done on Heavenly Mother at a fireside or a talk conference kind of thing that she gave, and well, some people complained and now she no longer works there.
Recently, somebody suggested that I give my son a father's blessing, which, first of all, stay in your lane. And second of all, it's kind of odd now that I'm thinking about it. I always had that option, whereas Jordan never had that option.
Boo, patriarchy.
I just find it funny that people who have fathers who have priesthood authority are kind of in an elevated position because they have this thing that most other people can never have access to. And surely somebody's going to come after me and say, oh, well, you can have different kinds of blessings and everything like that. But even still, it's a very small percentage of the population that gets access to God's priesthood.
But women can't have it, y'all, because that would just be the worst. Famous Mormons, you might know.
Since everybody had somebody to add, here's part 2.
Lead singer of The Killers, Brandon Flowers. There's also some current speculation saying that he is actually an active Mormon.
I remember people talking about garment-checking Dan Reynolds of Imagine Dragons, but, yeah.
Where's my Grey's Anatomy fans at? Katherine Heigl was raised Mormon.
It wasn't ever really for me, but Stephanie Meyer, the author of the Twilight books, is active Mormon.
R.I.P. this gem. He was also raised Mormon.
Everybody's favorite purse saleswoman right here, raised Mormon.
Things we do to stay awake when BB pulls an all-nighter. Dancing terribly. Laughing uncontrollably. Staring into the void. When desperate, wall sits. Kicking a toy that lights up the whole MF room on accident.
Fuck you, my child is completely fine.
Let's talk salamander letter. In the 1980s, a Salt Lake-based prominent document collector and, little beknownst to them, document forger came into possession of a letter that stated that when Joseph Smith went to go get the gold plates out of the ground, he was stopped by a salamander that appeared to him and told that he could not take the plates unless his brother Alvin were present. The letter also details things about treasure digging and was really going to be hurtful to the church's rhetoric. Even Apostle Dallin H. Oakes had apologies ready to go by the time that this was being public. He posited that the salamander was a way to interpret Moroni appearing to Joseph Smith. What's really telling is that one of the biggest critics of the church at the time, Gerald Tanner, a historian, was already telling people that it was false in 1984. It has since been proven a forgery.
This is interesting.
Another half-truth.
So a few of you have asked, so I'm going to share my tips for working through a faith transition or a faith crisis. Number one is to get as comfortable as you possibly can with ambiguity. Your badass brain does not like the unknown. It doesn't like things that are wishy-washy. Your brain is comfortable with things that are black and white and easy to understand and have solid, easy answers. So sometimes it's really easy to fall into the trap of, oh my gosh, I need to make a decision right now. What am I doing? Am I leaving? Am I staying? Am I nuanced? What is going on? So some of my mantras when I was going through my faith transition: I don't need to make a decision right now. It's okay to not know. Nothing bad is going to happen if I don't make a decision right away. Don't hold yourself to rigid timelines of when you have to have a decision or when you have to decide. If you can, just give yourself grace and patience in this process. Let's talk Mormons doing baptisms for the dead.
So baptism in Mormonism is what's considered an ordinance, and it's the first ordinance that you need to have to be saved. These ordinances can also be performed posthumously via baptism for the dead and other ordinances.
This right here is the baptismal font in the Salt Lake City Temple. So you, as a card-carrying member of the LDS Church, would go and be baptized vicariously for a dead person. And as you can see, it's sitting on 12 oxen, which represent the 12 tribes of Israel. Also notice the chairs up here for people that are witnessing the baptism to make sure that you are dunked completely. If you are not dunked completely, if a strand of hair comes up, if anything comes up, it has to be redone and it doesn't count.
It's basically like a hot tub, but like way less.
Hi guys, I'm sitting out here and I just unlocked something from the Traumatic Mormon Memory Vault. When I was in the Young Women's program, they talked about how you couldn't go do baptisms for the dead. The girls couldn't go do baptisms for the dead if you were on your period because you were unclean. That's a really awful message to be sending to young girls as young as 12. Somebody mentioned this in a comment on the last video and I totally had forgotten about this, and I am just sitting here bewildered. Yet another example of why the Mormon Church doesn't respect women. Have you ever wondered what it's like to be indoctrinated as a child in a religion? Well, let me tell ya. There are many examples of this in Mormonism, but this one is one of my favorites. This book was written by Wendy Watson Nelson, who is the prophet of the Mormon Church, Russell M. Nelson's second wife. Will you drink a cup of coffee? Not even once. Will you taste our delicious tea? Not even once. This isn't letting kids be kids. Like, they're literally preparing for a situation where they might see coffee, tea, or alcohol on a menu, and the only option they have is lemonade. Like, they're prepping for these situations as children. And then they sign a fucking contract. Not even once. So I have decided to go down the how do Mormons indoctrinate the youth and children and adolescents. And here's some interesting things I found. This is a super cute one for girls under 16, which is the dating age. Be choosy with whom you share your hugs and kisses, because the choices you make now will affect what happens later. Make temple marriage your goal. This is given to like 12 and 13-year-olds. And this one of my favorites, because kids should be paying tithing, right? Also, I think Pinterest feels bad for me because when I was searching like the youth activities and stuff they do on Pinterest, the ad that I got was for Smirnoff. So fun fact, I have OCD, like actual diagnosed OCD, not like I like my room clean bullshit. So when I was a member of the Mormon Church, I had religious scrupulosity, which is a form of OCD, so bad there are some bizarre things that I would do. I once heard in a lesson at church that we have to be thankful for everything that we have, because what if you went to bed tonight and you prayed and were thankful for the things that you prayed for, and the next morning you only had the things that you were thankful for in that prayer? So I made a checklist, and I would literally start with my sight, my ability to walk, like the most simplest of things, down to relationships, people, and I would just go down my checklist to make sure that everything I prayed for, I would wake up with the next morning. FYI, that's super unhealthy, and if you're doing that, seek a therapist and you're not alone.
Okay, so all your made-up drama's inconvenient to my sensibilities. I don't want to think about the things that question my tranquility. Why don't you just drop it? I think it's pathetic, your apostasy. I just left my gym, but you don't hear me shouting loud for all to see. Wow, you're right, I guess I never realized they were so comparable. Maybe all that made-up drama really wasn't very terrible. I just wonder if the gym is good enough of a comparison. Out of curiosity, when you went to the gym, did they ever do this? Mormons taught me what to think, and Mormons taught me how to feel. So unless your gym did all of that, then your comparison is dumb as fuck.
So part 2 of things I did because I have religious OCD or scrupulosity. So when I used to pray, I had to be really, really specific about what I was asking or praying for. So for example, I used to pray when my son was in like a crazy sleep regression that he would go to sleep, right? So I wouldn't be able to just say, I pray, you know, I need my son to go to sleep. I would have to say, I need my son to go to sleep until 6 or 7 or 8 a.m. the next morning. Because if I didn't stipulate that I wanted him to wake up, I was afraid that Mormon God would construe it as he's going to put him to sleep forever. So if you're struggling with things like this, just a reminder that 1, you're not alone, and 2, it would probably help significantly to talk to a professional. Just saying.
Mormons seem to have a hard time believing we're normal people, so stitch this and show me how you're normal.
Normal. Okay, let's see if I can do this. Here's my meds that make me normal. They don't really work. Here's my pile of laundry on our bed that needs to be put away, that I probably won't put away, and we'll just put it on the floor. Here's my normal husband. Here's my yoga mat that I bought on Amazon when I was going to start doing yoga, and I never did yoga, and I haven't even unwrapped it yet. Here's a pile of books I read/am reading. It's like 15 at a time because I have ADHD, don't judge me. This is my acceptance letter into grad school for my master's in social work. I also like rocks, but I don't put them in a hat and tell people that God speaks to me through them. So I'm going to try not to cry/get really angry while I film this, so please be patient with me. This morning on my Instagram stories, I shared an example that I was taught about, an analogy about purity culture and being a licked cupcake if you've had sex before marriage in the Mormon Church. And next thing I know, my DMs are
speculated that will be the case. The one that everyone brings up is Helena Mar Kimball. Helena Mar Kimball is a 14-year-old who Joseph Smith was sealed to. Despite being on the younger side of maturity, we have instances where we are sure that she was mature enough to be married. What matters for maturity, just to be frank, within this circle is whether or not a woman is menstruating, because that shows whether or not you are able to have children. We don't even think that she consummated it. If she did, it's totally fine. They were married. I truly believe that if there is polygamy in the next life, that it will be for our eternal joy and our eternal increase.
It's totally your choice. It's your life.
You guys are never gonna believe what I found at a Utah farmer's market. A freaking seer stone! I'm just kidding, that's not what I found. this gem is what I found. If you're not familiar, the Mormon prophet's wife, Wendy Watson Nelson, wrote this child indoctrination book for children. And I wanted to read it, but I didn't want to pay for it because I don't want to contribute to their already massive fortune. And so I got it for $4. But I haven't shown you the best part. What's that? An actual inscription from the author Wendy and Elder Russell M. Nelson. And what's more, she signed it. So based on the inscription, it sounds like this was a gift to a family from the Nelsons. And somehow this beautiful, toxic piece of garbage ended up at a farmer's market for $4.
Hey TikTok. In my ongoing effort to educate allies, I want to say a few things to my friends in Utah and elsewhere. During Pride Month, you know what else you can give up besides Chick-fil-A? Don't pay tithing to the Mormon Church. If you're an active Mormon and you pay one cent to the Mormon Church in tithing, you're not my ally. I'm sorry. There's no trust. And I don't trust people that do that. And people that call themselves an ally don't actively contribute to a hate organization. So that's the harsh reality. If you're paying any tithing to the Mormon Church, you are not an ally. Give it up for 1 month. 1 month. I challenge you. Thanks.
So there's lots of vile literature in Mormonism, but let's talk about one of the worst ones, if not the worst. The book that you should burn if you ever encounter it is The Miracle of Forgiveness, written by Spencer W. Kimball. Crazy enough, the book is actually controversial among Mormons. They actually stopped burning it in 2015 because it's so controversial and just complete and utter garbage. Let's just examine a few things he says, like, far reaching is the effect of the loss of chastity. Once given or taken or stolen, it can never be regained. And probably one of the most toxic quotes in the entire book, it's better to die in defending one's virtue than to live having lost it without a struggle. The book is filled with blatant homophobia, blatant misogyny, just absolutely toxic, and it's even led some people to suicidality. I'm not really a burning books type of person, but if you ever encounter this, burn it.
So recently, this guy, Brother Brad we'll call him, said a couple things about people who don't believe counseling a young, struggling teenager. He said that people who struggle with or have lost their testimony in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints may have more drama in their life and their countenances look different. All right, tell me if you can tell if we were Mormons at the time or if we were not. Here we are at my birthday party. Does it look like our countenances had changed? Okay, this one's a little bit cheating. Obviously, we were members at this time. Is the spirit in our eyes in this photo? I'm definitely happy in this photo, but do I have the spirit with me is the greatest question of all. This is our most recent one. What a cute family. Look at that hair. If you guessed that in any of these photos we were not temple-worthy members of the church, you'd be wrong. Stop spreading this harmful rhetoric.
So you guys want to know something funny? So sometimes we get random hate comments, right? It's like normal, we don't care. But there's one in particular that we've found like pretty suspicious. And yeah, so I'd just like to talk about that comment today.
This one's kind of funny because they follow us. Check that out. This is the most disappointing part of all right here. Yeah. It's the same as your Discord and your Steam username. Come on. We told you this wasn't for you. I don't know. This is
Why are you punishing yourself?
Making a party, chocolate Barbie, waiting on me for yo. In the back is Joe, I'm riding shotgun, the driver's on no.
So I think it's pretty well established that the Mormon Church hates ex-Mormons who get on TikTok and talk about their stories and, you know, how the Mormon Church is, you know, a piece of shit. So I was well aware of that, but we've reached a new low. So this was an article written that John Dehlin reposted saying if Korihor lived today, he would post on TikTok. So fun Mormon fact for you, if you don't know who Korihor is, he's an antichrist in the Book of Mormon. Korihor refused to listen to the prophets And Alma told him that because of this, his soul might be destroyed. Long, he refused to believe, they took away his speech, and he lived out the rest of his days begging for food and was eventually trampled to death.
So Brent Nielsen, don't hide behind your in-group lingo. Just say that you're threatened by antichrists like us.
Let's go.
Until 1978. What's up with that, Brother Wilcox? What, Brigham Young was a jerk? Members of the church were prejudiced? Maybe we're asking the wrong question. Maybe instead of saying, why did the blacks have to wait until 1978? Maybe what we should be asking is, why did the whites and other races have to wait until 1829? 1,829 years they waited.
Bradley, is there anyone home? When you use logical fallacies instead of confronting the racist discriminatory policies of your church head on, you can't be asking why people think your church is racist. I don't know, I think you maybe should have had Sister Wilcox check this one out before you said it. And during February, no less. Come on.
So I've seen a lot of talk over the last 2 days on TikTok about the Exmo community. And I think it's an opportunity for many of us to kind of reflect on what community looks like and whether that really applies. I think for many of us as ex-Mormons, we kind of, whether we like it or not, have kind of clung to structure. We came from a very structured, rigid environment. And I think whether it was intentional or unintentional, likely the latter, I feel like we've kind of assimilated parts of this group, this commonality that we all have as ex-Mormons on TikTok. I think we've kind of assimilated into a group or community structure. And I think this structure that we're kind of loosely residing in resembles what we left or what we came from. So now I see two things happening that I personally used to do as a Mormon. And the first one is confusing bullying for accountability. And the second one is prioritizing intent over impact. Now, a week or two ago, Brad Wilcox got up over a pulpit speaking to our youth and made some wildly inappropriate and harmful comments. Now, y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't recall getting on Exmo TikTok and seeing anybody say, well, his intentions were good. So while that situation and this one are wildly different, there are strands of similarities that I think indicate a pattern. Now, most systems of power, religions, big organizations, corporations, typically have leadership. And this leadership can essentially define what's the in-group and what's the out-group. What's the dominant group, what's the subordinate group. And I think that has been on display front and center during this whole debacle. For example, over the last 2 days, I've seen a lot of effort on large content creators punishing, trying to silence, and intimidating smaller creators from sharing their opinion or their story or how they relate to this whole debacle that we're all in. So for me, it begs the question, if a small creator would have made this same mistake, would they have received the same grace as someone with a larger platform, as someone who is heavily involved with big names in the ex-Mormon community who have very large platforms themselves? Would that small content creator have given the same grace, the same, I love you, don't leave TikTok, you're a great person? Because personally, I don't think they would have. We hold ex-Mormons and Mormons accountable, no exception. I'm gonna talk about it, so buckle up. So this article is brand new. It came out today in the Rolling Stone, and this is something you need to talk about. The Mormon Church was sending patients, this includes teenagers and young adults and children, to a therapist even after he was once accused. Felt like I couldn't breathe. He'd drag me to the floor and be on top of me, and I'd be fighting back because I couldn't breathe. This was ongoing for years, and at one point her thumb was even broken, and she had multiple physical injuries, including a black eye. Unfortunately, it doesn't stop there. This therapist was also running groups, and these groups were focused around teenage boys, young adults, and older men who were struggling with corn, and it was termed a corn addiction. Now things get even wilder. In this group, The entire group would be hinged on the progress of all the members. So if all the young men in the group stopped watching that type of media, then they'd get a pizza party. But if they didn't, then they all would not get the pizza party. Not only that, but if these teen boys completed this program and stopped watching that material, if they slipped up, the program, this therapist would send out an email to every single person, every single parent, everyone, letting them know that they had lost the battle. Not to mention, some of the men who were facilitating these groups were not qualified professionals. They were just people who had completed the group. And so there was no professionals facilitating this, and they were having in-depth conversations about this as grown men, really nitty-gritty, unneeded details with young boys. And not only that, but he was telling adult married men that if they didn't stop, they would be in danger of doing this. This man also runs and facilitates groups for what the Mormon Church terms is men with same-sex attraction. This man is still a licensed and practicing therapist in the state of Utah. He has opened up other branches of what he does across the state. There are these groups going on across the state, and the Mormon Church is sending kids to them. When is it going to be enough? When is it going to be enough? Sound off in the comments. What are your thoughts? They take me to the therapist. They tell me you're going to go in and you're going to recant everything that you told your therapist. This happened around my 17th birthday. They send me into his office. I sit down and I don't tell him anything because I didn't know what to do. So I understood then that there was an element of therapist confidentiality there that I could potentially tell him what was going on. And I kind of did in kind of a roundabout fashion. And so after the session, I don't recant it because I thought, I was protected by confidentiality. So I walk back to our car, I get in, and the first thing that they say, they're like, did you recant your statement? Like, did you say that? Because they told me I needed to say I made it up. And I wasn't going to do it.
Wasn't that it was a dream or something?
Yeah. Something along those lines, like either say that you imagined it or you were crying for attention or it was a dream, or I had to come up with some way that I made it up. And so I didn't. I went into the therapist. I didn't say anything. And so I come back to the car and I burst into tears and I'm like, no, I couldn't do it. I couldn't recant it. I couldn't make it up. I couldn't do it. And so they drag me out of the car. I was unwilling at this point. I was kicking and screaming like I could not do this. So they storm me back into my therapist's office. I still remember he had people in the waiting room. And they storm back into my therapist's office, bust open my therapist's door, throw me on the couch, and they're like, tell him what you just told me. And so I don't know how my therapist didn't think that there was some weird stuff happening here. But they stood there in the doorway and they said, she just said she made it all up. So she's going to tell you now that she made it all up. And that was it for me at that point. I knew it was all over. So they tell him that. I run out of the therapist's office and make it to, it was the bathroom, and I just cried on the bathroom floor. And my mom had to peel me off the floor and throw me back into the car. Because I was at my wit's end at that point. It was like my second time bishop, perfect patriarch family member had participated in covering up sexual abuse from a family member in the name of protecting the family name and protecting potentially any involvement that he had that I don't know about. All right, y'all, your favorite ex-Mormon is back, and I've got an update on none other than the big chaotic disaster that was Mormon Mom Talk. Unfortunately, this isn't a fun update. This is a sad update. She was charged with domestic violence and child abuse. According to this article, she got into an altercation with her boyfriend on February 17th. Those of you that have been following this story know that this has been her boyfriend Dakota, and they have broken up recently and gotten back together. According to this article, she threw her phone and wooden playset at Dakota, damaged his vehicle, threw heavy metal chairs that put holes in the wall, and kicked him and put him in a chokehold. And if you didn't think it could get any worse, you're wrong, because her 5-year-old daughter was sitting next to him on the couch and she threw the chair, which also hit her daughter. These are her charges, and she's going back to court on March 21st. Memes.
Memes.
You know, like memes. We're going to roll this clip for you so you understand the insanity.
Today we're going to be talking about mommy memes. I'm sure many of you have come across some memes. Largely, we go to those to get relief and to laugh and to make light of some of the challenges of motherhood. We're actually shedding a light on how dangerous and destructive these memes are. What these memes are doing is really destroying the sanctity of the calling of mother.
Stop. You're fucking pulling my leg.
Not included in the video is the way that they say mommy.
Mommy.
They call these mommy memes.
It feels like a crime is being committed as I'm listening to this. It's troubling.
They use that word a lot.
You see yourself more deconstructing, and I see myself not. I don't know. I like being a Christian.
I feel like people kind of think that once you've deconstructed, or you're like a godless atheist like me, that we kind of expect the whole world to also kind of follow suit.
Oh, yeah.
And that we don't want you to be Christian or anything like that. Essentially, where we want people to be is where Bethany is right now, where she's like, I like believing in God. I like being a follower of Jesus. And I also love you, and I respect what you have to say. We want people to just be able to respect other people's viewpoints.
Exactly.
And I know that I am very critical, and sometimes it probably comes across that I would never accept anybody like that. It just boils down to respecting other people's lifestyles and viewpoints. I feel like deconstruction has kind of become this catch-all boogeyman term. Oh, they just want to go off and they don't want to be part of whatever.
Right, they're just
anymore.
Bad Christians or they're bad Mormons or whatever.
I mean, by and large, that is in part due to the fact that people who deconstruct sometimes leave religion altogether and leave the belief in God behind and everything like that.
It
like
happens.
Me.
It's a spectrum, though. Just because you deconstruct doesn't, like, there's plenty of Mormons who still believe in God. There's plenty of Mormons who join other religions. There's plenty of Mormons who are atheists. There's, like, it's a spectrum of where you can go from there. Deconstruction is not synonymous with, like, you're a godless, atheist, horrible person. Is generally
some
what
of us
assume.
are, but, you know.
Not a horrible person.
Not a horrible person. I like to think I'm nice.
I think we all have equal opportunity for happiness. Happiness looks different for other people. I can say that I had a semblance of happiness when I was with my boyfriends.
This is another thing that they do, is that people who live and they are sinning, they do not experience true happiness, period, end of sentence. They won't ever know true happiness.
There's a shoe drop coming. Like, if they look happy right now, just wait, because the other shoe is going to drop and they're going to be unhappy again.
Well, they could be seemingly happy all their life, but once they are on to the next one, then they're really going to get their true reward.
Like, Mormons always believe it's coming back to them.
We're one of the only faiths that's mainstream or large enough to have national recognition that I know of that has a doctrine of Heavenly Mother that is actually sung about in our official...
Very controversial, by the way.
Sung about?
You're not even allowed to pray to her, Garden.
You don't even know her name.
You're not even allowed to talk to her, really.
And we're constantly told that you are living the Adam and Eve archetype. And unless you make a decision mutually with your wife, it's what we call unrighteous dominion.
And this drives me nuts, too, because Eve is the only reason that Mormons are where they are. Because Adam didn't have the balls to do what he needed to do, so Eve took the reins. So really, if we're following the Adam and Eve archetype, no, we're really not. Because if that was the case, women would have more say and more positions of power. Yeah.
I'm very aware that some people say, oh, because women can't have the priesthood, that you're a second-class citizen. But in the codified faith, women enjoy, sometimes will complain about almost preferential treatment.
What?
Beg your pardon?
So this is a version, I don't even know, of crazy, bizarre things that I believed when I was Mormon. And this one is probably one of the worst ones. This one probably takes the cake. So I hope you're sitting down. So when I was growing up, one of the things that was taught to us as young women was we had to be mindful of engaging in any sort of self-care, like intimate self-care, because our ancestors were aware of us and what we were doing. And we're, for the most part, very proud of our decisions. And so if we made any other considerable decisions, they might be there watching. Yeah, so that's enough to traumatize me into never doing any of those things when I was a youth.
And as usual, we have paired up with Bellesa, and you can go to the link that is in our bio and get a piece of machinery on your own or a gift card to a piece of machinery. It's awesome. We love them.
You're probably wondering about the stethoscope around my neck.
Yep, I was.
This is the most precious gift that Mare has given me.
Already giving gifts.
Meredith looks at her like Ruby used to look at Jody, with that like immense admiration and intensity.
Doesn't that feel amazing?
Oh gosh, and that, see, this is where connection comes in.
That's
is
right.
because I interacted and I gave her an experience that was very vulnerable for me. It put me in a really uncomfortable spot, and you showed up stable, and so that just reinforced trust. That reinforced connection.
Exactly. Safety, love. I probably said something. I don't remember this, by the way.
These are very like, these are therapist-y. This is professional talk. This is not like, speak about your experience and what happened to you. This is,
type stuff.
This is weird. And they're touching this whole time.
And actually, you're probably wondering about the stethoscope around my neck.
Yep, I was. Usually, if you have the qualifications, you're going to have them blasted on your website. Like, it's as much as for your protection as a clinician as, like, for the client.
Go to her website, BrittonFairley.com. It says the same thing here that it says on the back of her book. When you go to the FAQ about the author, like, Brett, where are you from? YouTube video, that's private. And all of these are...
We tried all of them.
All of them are private, which is really strange that she would have built a whole website and made all these videos. Now that they're gaining traction, she privated them all.
If you are a licensed therapist, why are you talking about life coaching? There are some people who do both. There are some therapists who are licensed, and then there are some people who also do coaching, and they're different things. The other thing that sets me off when I'm looking at well-versed in this after Jody, the word consulting. There's a difference between counseling and consulting is obviously not like diagnostic, not treatment-oriented, not symptom-oriented necessarily. Basically, what I can do within the bounds of being a coach that doesn't violate like where the line is between being a coach and a therapist. Meredith herself, from her official channel with her little verified little check mark, commented on our video.
By making this comment, instead of responding to the criticisms, clearing up any misconceptions that we may have had, and going for straight up character assassination, you unfortunately fell into the trap of ticking another box when it comes to your relationship relating to the Ruby and Jody relationship, because this was the first thing that I thought of as soon as I read this comment.
We watched a video a minute ago on YouTube, and there were a few people who were being very aggressive.
If I ever have a single shred of respect for Ruby Franke or Jody Hildebrandt, it's because I have lost all of my self-respect. I don't like them. I think they're terrible people.
They were being foul-mouthed.
What the fuck?
What the hell even is that anyway? Holy sh!
You stupid fucking piece of like...
And they were very angry, and it was blaming anger. It wasn't truthful anger. It was, you're doing this to me, and you're doing this to other people, and how dare you do that? And it was very clear that they were in this distorted position. And then after they spewed that for like, I don't know, a half hour, I mean, I was feeling sick just listening to them. And then they said, love you guys.
Thank you everybody for joining us. We love you all so much.
Just like that. And I was like...
Well, the whole video was just like, they looked bored out of their minds. I said, did they roll out of bed and make this video? Because they kind of look like it. And their tone was down. And then at the very end, they perked up and like, well, thanks for watching. Subscribe. And we love you. And I'm like, okay, there's manipulation right there. They knew the right words to say. They knew to wake up their faces and get bright. And it was not sincere. You cannot compartmentalize love. You cannot say I love you and then turn around and hate you.
So that's a little awkward.
In this context, I know that Hannah is massively privileged. in terms of what is available to her, even if she wanted to leave her husband, because that's a lot of the discourse online. It's like, well, if he's such a terrible person, she should just leave. And boy, is it much more complicated than that. So of course there's going to be implications for that. But to me, this sounds like the broken aspirations of a woman who was taught that sacrifice and suffering is the only way to get to Mormon heaven. I was going to be a ballerina. I was a good ballerina. My dream was to go to New York City. I wanted to stay in New York City. The whole farm dream, in my opinion, based on what they've put on the internet, never belonged to Hannah. It always belonged to Daniel. But even if we remove Daniel from this equation, she was going to have to give up being that like professional ballerina who maybe went on to like literally be a professional and do tours and travel the country, travel the world, because it's not compatible with having children. And so as much as I think there is room to hold Daniel accountable for like being kind of a doof in all of this, I also think that who we hold accountable at large needs to be Mormonism. If it wasn't Daniel who told her to give up her dreams here, it would have been Mormonism. You could replace any other Mormon man, generally speaking, and if they abide by the church's teachings, they would have all told her the same thing. And so as much as Daniel has a role, I think the issue that the majority of people are having here is with Mormonism at large.
By being an attack on our family and my marriage, portraying me as oppressed, with my husband being the culprit. This couldn't be further from the truth. Nothing we said in the interview implied this conclusion, which leads me to believe the angle taken was predetermined.
Cue circus music playing in my head. We spent so much time talking about how this journalist really illustrated without having to make any comments. Like everybody just pieced together exactly what was happening because all we're looking at is their behavior. And so for her to say like, oh, we didn't give them any reason to think any of these things, but I think you did. That's just not the conclusion that you want them to come to. A husband who won't shut the fuck up and let his wife talk and interrupts every fucking thought she has, and a wife who does so much that she has to spend a week in bed at a time because she's so burned out and so overwhelmed and maybe struggling with other things that we don't know. That doesn't paint the picture to me of like, I chose this life and I love it. That just goes to show the lengths that Mormonism has gone to, like tradwife-ism has gone to convince women that this is like normal, happy behavior.
Of all the Christian sects, Mormons are, by and large, the most right-leaning of them all.
Of the main, like, your big categories. This data is from 2014. This is the most recent that I could find of, like, this specific thing in general. Who knows? Maybe things have shifted slightly, but I would venture to guess that they have not.
Growing up, like, this was, like, across the board. It was well known that everybody at church, they all vote Republican. Even to the point where a good family friend of my family's, for whatever reason, as a kid, my parents thought it was important that we know, oh, they're Democrats, because that was really weird.
I went to elementary school with a McCain sticker on my backpack, and I handed them out to other kids at school, and my Mormon friend and I got in trouble for doing that, and they called my mom, and I got in trouble because I voted for Obama in our class election. I know. My mom was mad.
Maybe I can find a picture of me at a Romney rally before I could even vote. I was in high school. There I am in my little letter jacket. Mormons, Republicans. Like, that is just how it is.
Crazy things that we used to believe as Mormons.
When we were Mormon, we believed that Jesus Christ was the literal Son of God, and as such was conceived as any other man. More specifically, we believed that God had to do the horizontal Charleston with Mary in order to conceive Jesus. Brigham Young specifically taught that the birth of the Savior was as natural as the births of our children. We believe now that this plays a part in the widespread view that one of the main purposes of pleasure is to multiply and create children, which is very damaging.
Fortunately, we don't believe that anymore. So to help you on your journey of deconstruction and pleasure, everyone who enters our giveaway with Blessa at the link in bio wins either a free toy or a gift card.
And so I'm throwing my entire family heritage away. I'm free. Where's the polyamory and the drugs?